So let me see. You should all see my screen, hopefully. Let me just check. This time I brought another laptop just to make sure I'm streaming, to avoid the problems I had last week. So yeah, just checking for now. No worries, take your time. I'm not gonna start before you join. Checking the chat, checking everything. So it seems to be streaming on Twitch at the very least. There might be some issues with YouTube, but you know, from my point of view, it's progress. At least I am streaming somewhere. So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you are all doing well in these special times. Pandemic is hard everywhere. I hope you're all staying safe. And yeah, let's see. I'm gonna wait a little bit just to make sure that it works for everyone. I'm monitoring the chat. The chat seems to work. Twitch seems to work. So far, so good, I would say. Let me just stop the stream on my other laptop. So I was just watching to see whether it's streaming. It seems to be streaming, so for now it's good enough. Let's see. Yeah, let's wait a little bit. Can you all hear me? That would be my first question, I guess. Can you all hear me? And let's see also. I assume it is. No, I'm just gonna check a second time, just to make sure, just real quick, that it is actually streaming with sound. So you might hear my voice for a short period. Let me try to see if there is sound. Yeah. Okay, I can hear myself, so it's all good. All right. Hey, hello, Agnes War. Welcome. Happy to see you here. And from YouTube nonetheless, so which means YouTube seems to be working perfect. So I think I've got my confirmation that everything seems to be fine. Apologies if you hear some weird noises. My neighbor is working on his flat. He's doing some renovation work. It's been going on for 2 weeks already, but hopefully there shouldn't be too loud noises. And so yeah, hope you're all safe. Hope you're having a good day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. So I'm from Paris, by the way, France. It is morning here, close to noon in 1 hour. And today we're gonna continue to talk about realworld.io and continue to implement a backend with Golang and the Neo4j driver. So it's been a while, it's been 2 weeks that I haven't streamed. 2 weeks ago, Wednesday was a national holiday in France, which is why I didn't live stream. Last week, I just happened to have streamed to myself. I thought it was working, but it turned out I was speaking to myself for a full hour, which is an interesting experience. So I actually made some progress last week, but nobody could see that. So let's recap a little bit what we're doing here, and let's see. So we have this realworld.io. So if you type realworld.io, you will be redirected to this GitHub repository. And the idea of this realworld.io is to include some specs to implement a backend and or a front end for a medium.com clone. So medium.com, as you might know, is a blogging platform. And so this goes way beyond the scope of a simple to-do app, for instance. To-do app is like, this minimal application skeletons that you can implement in many languages. It is the same idea here, but with a much more complete application. And so this is my fourth session, the third stream because of last week problems. And as you can see, you have a set of API specs that you can import in Postman, for instance. So you can find everything in the starter kit And if you follow these links, you will end up with a collection of API calls that you can import in Postman. So there are already today a few examples of front-end and back-end implementations. My colleague Adam Cowley also worked on front-end with Neo4j, so you can check out our Neo4j examples. Neo4j example GitHub organization, and you will see already a few examples with Neo4j and Node and JavaScript. So if you type real world, you should see, so there is a Golang one, which is completely not ready yet. It's just an ongoing pull request, but you can see the Nest.js Neo4j real world example, for instance, for a complete example that my colleague Adam is working on. And so back to what we're doing. So let's see what Postman gives us. As you can see, when you import the file that you can retrieve from the repository, when you go to realworld.io, you will end up with a few API calls grouped by category, I would say. So right now, what we've done so far is working with the register endpoint, and now we're working on the login endpoint. So just rest assured, I'm not gonna live stream the whole 31 endpoints, because I think that would be boring for everyone. My idea here is to, of course, complete the application, so I will try to do that at some point, but just stream the beginning so you can see what the experience with Neo4j driver in Golang looks like, and how you can get started with your own application in Golang. And so so register is in theory complete. Login is what we're working on, but you know, I did that last week, but again, I was live streaming to myself, so I couldn't really show whether that actually worked. So to prove that to you, let's start with Neo4j desktop. So I have I have multiple databases over there, but I've created one especially for our project. So I'm gonna just start it, open it, empty it completely, because I think the node was from last week's test, just to make sure that register works. Hey Charan, hello. Hello, nice to meet you all. Where are you all from, by the way? As I told you earlier, I'm from Paris, France. I'm curious to see where you're watching this from. And so if we look at the database right now, there might be a registration node already, but let's get rid of that and prove that our registration endpoint is complete. So, okay, I have a database here, a local one that is running. Let's see my main function. So here I have a simple project I started a few weeks back. Oh, you are from India, nice. What time is it there? I think it's you're close to the evening in India, right? I'm close to noon here, but I think it's later in the day for you guys, I believe. And so let me close everything. But so we have this standard Golang project, you know, with using Go modules, with the main. So actually, our main dependency here is this one, the Go driver. That's for our production code. The rest is for the testing parts. So I can go back to that in a minute. But yeah, basically, those are for tests, those are for the production code. And by the way, there's been a release this morning, so I could even upgrade to the beta 2. So Golang is almost on par with the other drivers. The general release for V4, I mean, the generally available version, the stable one, will be released at some point, hopefully before the end of the year. So yeah, I should actually upgrade at some point to beta 2 because it's been released this morning. And so if we look, just to make sure the registration endpoint works, so what do I have here? I have my main function, looking for some information, you know, where the Neo4j database lives, the credentials. I could add also the database, because as you may know, in Neo4j 4, you have multi-tenancy now, so you can select a specific database just for your application. So that's something I've not done here, so I'm using the default one, because when you spin up a Neo4j database, you got the system database, and you've got a default non-system database called Neo4j. And what the driver does in that case, if you don't specify any database, it will pick the non-default non-system default database, sorry, called Neo4j. So that's what happens here. And so what I do, I have this repository that I'm using that uses the driver and the handler, so it's a controller term, like that manage everything. You know, does the register part, reads the request body, and marshals that into a user registration request, which has username, email, password, and then we try to register that into Neo4j and reply with a successful response. So at this point, we don't cover all the path, right? As I told you, the idea here is to show what the experience of developing Golang with a driver feels like. I don't want to be exhaustive, testing all the edge cases, etc. You see, I'm ignoring a bunch of errors here, which I wouldn't do in a production application. But even arguably, even if I was working with a real production application, I wouldn't start with all the edge cases. I would just, do the happy path and then cover the other edge cases at some point. So I have this, and if I look at the code here, I should have one implementation in production implementation called user Neo4j repository that needs a driver. Open the session, write transaction in that case, because we're using transaction functions. And we're going, so that's the default mode. Like if you just run a query, by default, it will assume that it's a write query. So you will be able to route that to a server, to an instance that supports write transactions. And so, but it's actually not needed strictly right here because I'm using a write transaction anyway, so it knows it has to route to a server that can accept writes. And so I open a write transaction called persist user, hash the password, and persist in the database, basically. So pretty standard stuff, but let's make sure it works for real, right? I have tests, of course, and I can show that in a second, but let's make sure it works first. So as you can see, I need a bunch of environment variables. Hopefully they are already there, so we'll see. If not, it will just blow up and we will fix it. And it does not blow up, so okay, I think it's already configured with all the credentials that I need to start the application. I mean, we can check even real quick. We might see, yeah, environment with a very secure password. Of course, don't do that at home. Don't do that for a real production database. But I'm using the simple ball protocol, like single instance thing. No routing, etc. Username, password. So for local usage, it's perfectly fine. And again, password. Don't show your real passwords and don't use this kind of passwords in real life. So that's nice. I've got this running on port 3000, which I could also make configurable at some point. So let's go back to Postman. And let's see, how does the body look like? Okay, I already have an example here that's very nice. I just have to run it. So localhost port 3000 on users. I need to post this JSON payload, which is of course JSON with an email, a very secure password. Again, don't use this kind of password in real life, and a username. And that's not my real email, by the way, if you're wondering. So let's see what happens. Does it blow up? Hopefully not. And let's see the response over here. And I've got the response body. I've got a 201, so which means it's been created successfully. And I've got a response with username and email. We don't send the password, obviously. We just hash it and store it in the database. So let's have a look. Is it stored in the database? So have you seen before I deleted everything from the database? So if it didn't work, the database should be empty. If it worked, it should return something. So I'm using Neo4j desktop here for convenience. And I'm using a very inaccurate query, but given I have only one node for now, it's fine. If you have a million nodes, maybe don't do this, but it's not the case right now. And if we look, we have this, this node with an email. And let's see in more details. I have a password with a hashed value, so not plain text, obviously, and not weak encryption, and username and email. So it looks very fine to me. It has a label users. It has an internal ID that we don't really care about at this point, but it seems that it works. Pretty cool, but well, it was not too much of a surprise, right? Because we have tests. And talking about tests, let me show you what we have so far. And then we will go to the login part. So we have two things, right? We have at the controller level, you know, sending HTTP request, getting a response. So we have something like this. Like it should register a user. So I send, so I instantiate my handler, but with a fake repository because I don't want to spin up Neo4j just for this layer. As this layer, I'm just interested in the HTTP stuff. I don't want a real database for this step because it would be a bit too slow and for not much added value. So I'm using the HTTP test package from Golang. That's something that they provide by default. So it's part of the SDK. And that way I can record what happens. I can record the interactions. I can record what requests are sent, etc., etc. So what I do is I have a recorder that is actually my response writer, because if we look at the handler, that's a standard handler function in Golang with a standard package. I'm not using any framework, by the way, for HTTP. I'm using the built-in one. That's why you didn't see any dependencies for you know, writing a web app or REST APIs. I'm just using the standard stuff. So I have a response writer to write responses and request to read. So I'm using here the HTTP test package again to send a request, which is a post on users and with some JSON data. And response writer just to observe what happens. So in that case, because I'm using a fake repository and I don't expect it to blow up, because even if it blew up, actually I'm not testing right now the error. So I just have a minimal fake implementation. I could use a mocking library here as well instead of writing that code myself. That's definitely a possibility, but you know, keeping things simple for now. I don't want to introduce too many things at the same time. For now, I'm keeping the basic SDK and making sure that we focus, you know, on what's interesting here, which is Neo4j's simple Golang application. And so, yeah, and then I expect some response as well, which would look like this. So I expect this in a JSON form. So I have an expected, so I have my user request that I marshal into JSON, send it to the request, and I got a response, and I compare it to this one. And that works fine. So that's the HTTP stuff. So not the most interesting bits, obviously. And then we have the repository test, which is slightly more interesting because this time I involve Neo4j. I could try to mock the driver, etc. But honestly, it's I might do it for production app because then I would get faster feedback. Maybe, maybe not. That's something that worth considering or not. Here I'm using, it's not really a unit test in that case, but it's more of an integration test. Why? Because I'm using test containers. So test containers, it's probably more known in the Java world, but there is actually an implementation for Golang. And in Golang, you know, you have several options. Well, you could use a Docker API directly because Docker is written in Golang. But test containers might be a little more accessible if you want, you know, to spin up containers in your tests. So I advise you to check it out. It's pretty neat when you need to run integration tests and, you know, start containers instead of, you know, having a real local database on your machine. That way, you just use test containers. The only dependency is to have a Docker daemon running. And so that's why you can see I have, actually, you don't see it, but I have Docker started. That's my only dependencies locally, but that's a pretty common prerequisite nowadays on developer laptops anyway, I guess. And that way you can start containers, etc. So which is exactly what I do here. I'm using test containers to start Neo4j. I just use a username password to override the default one. And there is some nice utilities there. So I'm saying, so Neo4j, so here I'm just targeting the latest one. So the latest tag of the Docker image, which would be 4.2.0 at this point. You would probably want stricter control. You would probably want to specify a version or even maybe test on several versions. That's something, for now I'm keeping it simple. I want a bold port because that's a port I'm interested in, you know, to send bold messages in there. Overriding authentication, and that nice waiting for here is a nice utility that will basically wait for logs in the container to decide whether the container is ready to serve this request. So here I'm just looking for the substring bolt enabled, and if bolt is enabled, that means my container is ready to accept messages from the driver. And so you define the request like this, and then you wrap it into a generic container request saying that you want it to start immediately or not. So in that case, I want to start it immediately. And once I've done that in a before each, because I'm using Ginkgo and Gomega, that's why I have this describe before each, after each, and each structure, which is quite familiar in many different languages, and a bit more easy to work with, I would say, than the standard GoTest layout, because GoTest layout would just have a sequence of tests. If you have common codes, it can be a bit cumbersome to work with. So here at least I have this before each block when I can do that every time. You could imagine to do that once per test, but then you would have to clean up the database. I mean, I will probably switch to that at some point. Right now, again, I'm keeping it simple because I have a single test. But if I have several tests, I probably don't want to start a container every time. Probably only once, maybe even once per package. That's something that can be done as well. But, you know, let's keep it simple. So I start the container before each test. I stop it after every test. So basically my test always get a fresh new container with an empty database. Then I get the mapped port. Oh yeah, one important thing with test containers is that the port you get locally is random. There is no way around it. There is no fixed port. So just to be sure, yeah, you have to get this. And I see a question in the chat: is it possible to test without containers? So there are two ways without containers, I would say. One way is to unit test, but if you look, that means what? That means you will have to have some kind of driver mocks, which is a bit tedious to do. So you will have to mock the driver. So you will have to wrap it into some kind of struct or in some kind of interface, so you can have the default one that delegates everything to the real driver and another one for your test. That's more work, but the reward here is faster feedback, because obviously it will be a unit test. But then every time you upgrade to a major version of the driver, your code here could break. Because if we look at the driver, let's see how it looks like. So that's an interface. So you could imagine indeed generating a mock for this. You could try to mock. There are mocking libraries that do that for you, that generate codes based on the interface you gave it, generate mocks for you. So that's something you could imagine to do. Might be a bit tedious, but not unfeasible. And session is an interface as well, so why not? I might do that at some point if I have many tests and I don't want to spin up containers. So that's the one. That's a unit test approach. And if you still want integration tests, but don't want or cannot use containers for some reasons, but you have a server somewhere, then you could, although I would advise against it personally, if it was up to me, you could, instead of spinning up a container, interacting with a server, may it be a server on your local machine or provisioned somewhere. However, I like my tests to be hermetic. So I don't know if you heard about hermetic tests. The idea is they should be self-contained. They should not. So I will just let you Google this on your own, just to read a bit more about it. But I think it comes, yeah, I think it originated from Google. These hermetic servers and stuff. So I use a hermetic test as often as I can, because that way my tests don't depend on the outside world. And let's say when when you're trying to find some regression, you're bisecting with Git, trying to know where the problem comes from. If you go back to a commit 5 months ago, and then this commit references a server that no longer exists, then you're kind of doomed, because your test will fail, but not for the reason you're looking for. So your bisecting, for instance, might fail. So usually, if you can have self-contained tests, it's better. So either by using containers or just unit test. And yes, containers are slow, that's for sure. The startup is slow. That's why, instead of doing, what I would advise is not to do before each, but before all. So you start the container once per package. So the first test will be a bit slow, but then all the other tests will be as fast as they could be. And so that way you will spin up the container only once. So it will be worthy when you have more tests. Right now I have only one integration test, so I've not done that yet. But you have ways to tell your test containers to start only once per package. Like for your entire integration test in a single package, it could start only once, so that will mitigate the cost. And for in-memory databases, that's something that exists in the Java world because Neo4j is implemented in Java primarily. That's not something that you can do easily in Golang. So yeah, so I think that's, I guess that's your only options. Either mocking the whole driver surface, driver APIs, or spinning up containers, but maybe once per package instead of doing once per test. And at least you get higher fidelity, right? Because if you're trying to have some alternate implementation or even coming with your own, let's say you have a lot of time and you're brave enough and you want to try to implement an in-memory variant of Neo4j. I mean, that's quite a hard thing to do properly and to maintain even more. You would not get high fidelity, right? You want high fidelity in your test as well. So that's why test containers are on the rise, and they are, because you get the real thing, you get the real database. You don't get some kind, like H2, for instance, in the Java world. You can use H2 or HSQL, etc. to have in-memory databases, but they're not a real thing. Like if you're in production, you're using Postgres or Oracle, etc. It's not exactly the real thing. So hopefully that doesn't matter too much because you don't do two queries that are too complex, but it can make a difference. And with Neo4j, yeah, I would advise either go with unit tests if you want to try to mock the whole driver API surface, or use test containers or something like that. So your tests do not need the outside world to run. And thanks for this question. Appreciate it. Hopefully that would have given you some ideas on how to go forward. So let's look quickly at this test and then go to the login part. So what it does, it gets the local port. Again, it's a random port, so you have no choice. I'm building the URI from there because, again, it's a real thing. It's a real server. It's just started with my test. I instantiate a driver to talk to that specific address. Then I create my repository, give it a driver, and then I start the thing. So I have this call, register user. I give it a user with username, email, initial password. And so I call the register user, and once the call is done, what I'm trying to do, I'm reading from the database to make sure that the registration worked. So that's why I told you there was, no big mystery around the fact that it worked. We kinda already knew that with the test because it's an integration test working with a real database. So, and in that case, what I do, I'm just running this time a read transaction because I don't need to write anything. So I'm in a single instance, so we don't care that much, but still, at least it's more semantically correct. I'm just running a match query here to get my user, see the hash password, and making sure that the username matches, email matches, and the password match, which is a bit trickier because it's a hashed password in the database, it's a clear text password in the test. So password match, as you know, in the implementation, and here as well, I need to use bcrypt, which is configurable hashing algorithm. You can configure basically the complexity of the hashing. So the more complex, more time it takes, but it's also a good thing because the more time it takes to compute, the more time it takes to crack. And let me see, I have another question here. Hi Alex, I have a question in making a Cypher query that makes sure that the journey of the graph always starts at a certain node and ends at another. There can be any nodes in between, but no node. But also no node. All right, so I think what you're looking for is something like, so I'm just, let's say you have a node here, you have something here, and another node in the end, probably with some labels, and maybe some properties even. Prop, and another one with some other characteristics. Hopefully I can type. There can be any nodes in between, but no nodes in between would be closed. So I'm not sure what would be closed means in that case, but let's see if I can answer real quick, and then we will go back to our Golang example. So what you can do is you can have zero, I mean, if they are directly connected or not, you can use variable length relationships. So you have degrees here, which could mean 0 to, so by I mean, if you write that, it will look for this node directly connected or I mean, from 0 to, you can have several relationships in between, which means several nodes as well. So I think if you play within syntax, Alex, it should get you close to what you want to do. So it's called, I believe, variable length relationships. If you look at this, it should hopefully, let me see, I find this. It should hopefully help you get what you want. So let me send that in the chat, and that will give you some examples about how it works. Okay, post it in the chat. Hopefully that helps you. Thank you for the question. So we won't have any complex pattern like this today. And so finally, so thank you all for your questions. I appreciate it. And you say, okay, I understand. All right. Yeah, so you want the end node to be the end and the start node to be the, okay, so maybe something you can do as well is you probably don't want, so I don't remember exactly where not, and you can probably do something like this, like there is nothing coming to n and nothing going out of m or something like this. I mean, you can probably precise the relationship type, but yeah, I forgot one. So there might be, and you could get the path out of this. So that way n is not connected to anything, and m is not connected outwards to anything else. So maybe something like this. I would advise to you explain our profile here just to make sure it's not inefficient, but apart from that, that should get you close to what you want, hopefully. But yeah, thank you for your question. I'm sorry we won't be able to cover this kind of aspects today, but hopefully I gave you some tips that will help you realize what you want to do. And so now let's go to login. Thank you again for all of the questions. Feel free to shoot your questions here. I'm happy to try to answer them. So login, what is it? It's still a post. And what else? Let me just close this. Yes. We send an email, we send a clear text password because you're trying to log in here. And we should have some response. So not all the attributes are necessarily relevant, like the bio, image stuff. We don't necessarily care at this point. But we must return the email, the username, and the token, which is an interesting bit. And so let's see. So I already started this last week, so let me show you where I am right now. So I started to write login handler. So again, there is a user login request, which looks exactly the same. So you see email password, and registration is almost the same, except there is no password, which is fine because, I mean, here I'm cheating a little bit because I'm reusing the same, but I don't have any password. But I have this omit empty annotation that says to omit the field, so I will get the default value. So that's cheating a little bit. I think a more correct way would be to have a separate struct with just username and email, but I'm a bit sloppy here on purpose just to get things forward. I would, in a real world, no pun intended, in a real world application, I would actually probably use another struct, even though it shares 2/3 of the same fields. That's just coincidental, right? It doesn't mean they are the same. And so the kind of answer I expect is username, email, token in the response. And then I have this handler. My handler, as usual, takes a response writer and a request. And so what I'm trying to do here is to read the request body, extract, this user information, try to find the matching user by email and password. So that part will be in the repository, and we'll come to that in a bit, maybe today, maybe next week. And then at some point I need to generate a token, and we'll get back to that. And when the token is generated, then I write a 200, marshal the response, and write the payload. Okay, so that seems pretty basic. It's not completely done, as you can see, the token is not there. So there is obviously a test with that. So here we are back to unit testing because I don't want to start a container just for the HTTP stuff. So I have my user login request with this real email and real password. Just kidding, this is not my real email. And then you should just log in with instantiate my handler, which posts to use /user/login, which I believe is correct or not. Nope. It's just, wait, that's strange. Oh, sorry, yeah, /user/login. Yes, no, that's correct. A fake user repository again, because I don't want to have a real user repository talking to a real database. Same stuff as before, response writer just to record the interactions with the HTTP test package built in Golang SDK. I'm calling the logging method, and then I expect 200, I expect this email, I expect this flow. And token I expect it not to be empty, which is probably good enough for now. I don't necessarily into the exact contents. We can discuss about that. Maybe I can be a little bit more accurate, at least that the structure is indeed the token I intend to have. And so if I run this test, so for now I'm gonna focus on it, which means I will run only this test and not the other test of the package. So let's run the tests. Maybe let's stop, yeah. I will also stop the application here because it's still running in the background and I don't need that. So the test fails and we can see that we have an empty string for the token. Token should be set and sadly token is not set. So that's the part where I am at. And so Alex is asking to get in contact for Cypher questions. What I would advise you to do is to join the Neo4j user Slack or community. There are two websites basically. There is community.neo4j.com where you can ask questions like that. And there is also, I will post that in the chat. And there is also neo4j.users.slack.com where we'll be happy to take your questions, and it's monitored by many people, so yeah. So let me post this in the chat if I can. Yeah, hopefully, and then so Slack and Discourse, our own Discourse instance called Neo4j Community. It's monitored by more people than me and smarter people than me, so hopefully you will get better answers. Hopefully that will help. And yeah, you don't have to, it's free. You don't have to pay for anything. It's just you can create an account there and then you will get any answer you want. And so now let's get to this token thing. So what I'm going to use right now, and I'm going to be super sloppy. So yeah, just a grain of salt before I start. I'm gonna get very simple implementation because that's not the core of what I want to show in the streams, but I need to do this to get forward anyway. So don't necessarily reproduce blindly what I'm doing. There might be security issues, etc., etc. So I'm hopefully not too much, but we never know. So what I'm gonna use, actually, I'm gonna follow a blog post that I'm also gonna share in the chat. Because authentication is really not something I enjoy doing. I find it personally very boring. It doesn't mean it's boring, it's boring for me. And there is a whole explanation of JWT and Golang. So that's basically what I'm gonna follow here. I'm not pretending to know everything, I don't. And especially when on these kind of topics. So let me share this blog post here and I'm gonna follow it step by step. So what I want to do, I want to add a dependency. So one way to do that, you could either edit manually the go.mod file, or you can use the good old go-get. So I'm not going to update my shell right now. I'm going to do it later. Thank you, my Z shell. And all I need to do is something like this. It will get the latest version, and yeah, fetching the transitive dependencies of this. And here we go. So I should have this new, so indirect at the moment because I'm not importing it yet in the source code. And so what do I want to do here? I want to create a token, right? So let's do, for now, let's be a bit sloppy. I'm just gonna create it here. So what do I want to do? I want probably, so let's see. I'm gonna maybe I like to write code that does not exist yet. So I'm also, it's not visible here. I usually do TDD here. I mean, at least my own style of TDD, maybe not academic TDD, but so I can get the user to create the token based on the user, and that should return me a string or an error, or maybe something else, we'll see. So what do I need to do? Right now I'm following the tutorial. I just picked a few snippets of code here and there to get at least, you know, to get the basic thing working. So as you will see, I will not do the full article, and you will see in the middle there is a big warning like, hey, if you stop there, it's there are security issues. So again, don't reproduce this at home blindly. But you know, for the live stream, I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty details of how to generate a JWT token in details securely, etc. So I'm just going to do the minimum version, which is not completely correct for real applications. So please, again, don't do this exactly like I'm doing. So I'm gonna need this JWT. Yes, I have it. Nice. Map claims. So I have this. I have those claims. I will add some stuff to them. So I will have a token that I will create from those claims. I will add some stuff. You know, here I'm just basically reading code, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know if you know the meme of this, but that's basically what's happening right now. So I have new with claim, I guess, methods, the signing method, which would be, I don't know. I have no idea. The higher the better, I guess. So let's pick this one, and I give it the claims. The claims are this. So that gives me a token or an error. And of course, infamous if error not nil, do something about it. And okay, and error. All right. Oops. Yeah, no, it's fine. Oh, wait, what? Oh no, it gives me only a token, my bad. I cannot even read code properly, that's very nice. Okay, so I have this token, and then I need this sign string. Not sure where it comes from, so let me just have a look real quick at the example, because I missed a tiny detail here. Where does it add string comes from? I have no idea. Add string, sign string. Small detail I hadn't caught up. Sign string comes from which package? JWT, yeah. Okay. So that should be good enough, hopefully. Sorry, issue with my mouse. JWT sign string. Come on, do it. It doesn't want to do it. Signs or signed string. Nope. Where does it come from? That's the joy of live streaming, right? It's also live failing sometimes. Oh yeah, okay, my bad. Yeah, sorry. That's what happens. And what I want here, so maybe something I can do or not. We'll see. Let's keep it simple for now. I'm just gonna assume I have an environment variable that will probably not stay there, because I don't want to have environment variable all over the place. I'd rather have that at the main method level, so I don't have to look everywhere. But for now, let's do it like this, like it does in the blog post, and then at some point I will move it to some other place. And you know, the create token will probably not stay at the controller level. I will probably have a dedicated struct and file. And then I have my result or an error, which I can actually return directly, because either I got a string or an error. So nice. So for now I'm going to be super sloppy, ignore the error. And I need to add some stuff to the claims. So here I'm blindly copying, I have no idea exactly what that means, but I have authorize, which seems to need to be true. Claims user ID, which in our case, we don't have a UID So I can be a bit sloppy and probably use the username. And there is the expiration, because we don't want the token to be valid forever, because if anyone steals it, then you're doomed. And there's still going to be an issue about that, actually, in the way I'm doing it right now. Like if someone, even for the small period of time the token is valid, someone could steal it and basically impersonate you. That's why it's not a good idea to do it exactly like I'm doing right now, but I don't want to spend hours on this live streaming that, so let's try to roll with this for now. And I can use the exact same thing as it does because I like it. It's now plus 15 minutes. Why not? So I want the time unit minute, and I want to do this, and I want a Unix timestamp. So nice. And hopefully that should be enough for my test. Again, not a production grade create token. Don't do it exactly like here, but I want to move on to the next test, which will be the find by email and username, find by email and password, sorry. So let's see. Hopefully it should work better, unless I miss something. Yeah, cool. So it's, yeah, there are a bit of contradicting signals here. I'm saying that the test suite has failed, but the test passed. Why? Because when you're using Ginkgo, like I do, if you focus the tests, then it means all the tests don't run, and that's considered as a failure for the whole test suite. So that way you don't forget to remove that before you commit. Otherwise, you will fail the test suite anyway. So that passes. My token is not nil. I could have a bit of a stronger test instead of just saying it's not empty. For now, I'm a bit sloppy and lazy, but I will work on this. I promise you to get it a bit better, but not just for the live stream because it's a bit boring. So just run every test to make sure I've not broken anything else. So the container is starting for the repository test because it's in the same package right now, the same users package. And let's see. Oh, something broke. Oh no. And what happens here? So should register. Somehow I broke something. Or maybe something I forgot before. So what happens here? We have a user registration, or pointer of user registration. See the small hint here? It's a pointer that I'm comparing to a struct directly. So instead, I should just, yeah, maybe something I missed during my refactoring. Obviously, it's still not merged, so that's all good. So if I do this, hopefully it should just work. Yeah, it's pointer to pointer, otherwise it doesn't work for the comparison. Or maybe the contrary, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe struct to struct instead of pointer to pointer, but okay, that works. Cool. So now we have everything. Actually, not quite. We don't have everything, and we have a bit less than 15 minutes to at least get started, and we'll talk about Neo4j again, so I'm happy we're not just doing token stuff and authentication stuff. I would be, which is what happened last week, actually, you know, when I was live streaming to myself. I just did this boring part of the handler, and I was like, oh, come on, I haven't talked really about Neo4j again. So, but yeah, at least you've been saved from that. So now, what do I need to do? I'm not sure. Let's see. Find by email and password. Oh, that sounds interesting. Let's look. Oops, not ready. So that's something I need to do now. I need to implement it, but then, as I said, I like to drive my implementation by testing. So that's what I'm gonna do here. And lucky me, I already have a test, which is gonna be quite similar. So right now it's a lot of code, it's not super clean. That's something I will clean up afterwards. I know refactoring is important. It's not that I don't want to show it, it's just I have limited time, so, you know, priorities, right? It's all about priorities, and I don't want to show refactoring because it's not Neo4j specific, but it's still very important, so do it as much as you can, especially when you're in between tests, not when you're trying to solve the test. So it registers users and it logs users in. Nice. Okay. So what do I need to do here? So first, and that's a nice thing, because even if we're not done, I will start with Neo4j anyway, because why? I need to have a user in the database. But I'm starting a container, so the container is empty, the database is empty. So I need to insert some stuff in there. So again, I could switch to before all after all. That's a optimization I will do at some point, just not now. So I have this, I have the port, I have the address. Actually, all of this could be done. That's something I'm gonna need again. So I'm just gonna need here an address that will be dynamically retrieved right here in the before each, because I need it everywhere. And we could argue that even the driver, I will need it anyway. So yeah, let's do even better than this. Let's get the driver, Neo4j driver. And that way I can move almost everything here. My address is here. And the close, or the defer close, usually what happens, I have an after each. So what I'm gonna do is close the driver right here. And this. And remove this. Okay, so now at least it's a bit leaner, it's a bit slimmer. And I have a code, I mean, that part can be a little less verbose. I can add some stuff, I can add some technical details. We'll do that at some point. And so let's see, I have this repository, and even, you know, the repository actually is the same, it's going to be the same. So I could, yeah, let's go further. You know, we're on a roll here. Yay. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to instead have this repository. And what is it going to be? It is actually, yeah, the driver I still need it, my bad, because I want to close it afterwards. But I also need the repository, which is users.user repository. And then I just need to do this. All right. So something I've not mentioned today, but I've said it several times before. The driver usually is instantiated once when your application starts, right? It's meant as a singleton, right? Story gets a little more complicated when you have multi-database, but for simple cases like single database targets, once for your application lifetime is great. And then you can open sessions, one per thread, etc. So you don't need to. So yeah, basically driver is kind of a singleton. Just thinking about that right now, not related to what I'm doing, but because we were working with some testing and we had the driver around, I was thinking about this. Okay, so now I will do something very similar. So I have my repository now, which is nice. It's already fresh and ready for me. And I want to find by email end users. That's nice, but I don't have anything yet. Example.org, and let's see, super password. I'm not completely leaked, right? So that's okay. Let's have at least the skeleton, the big, the important parts of the tests and sketching out. So clear test password. Then I've got this, I'm calling my given. So some people like to write given when then some frameworks impose it. I'm just trying to have like in identifiable blocks like this with just, you know, empty lines in between. That's just me. And it should give me a user or an error, hopefully, and I'm gonna be lazy here. So first thing I'm checked, so that's my given, that's my when, that's my then. User should log in. So I should not have any error. And then I probably expect user.email to equal email. So that's Gomega, by the way, for users structure with expect to equal, etc. That's Gomega right here. And Ginkgo right here. That's why you don't see any package because I'm using the dot import. So it's not prefixed by package, I use the functions directly. I have this password match, which is quite handy, and I'm just probably gonna write that expect password match initial password, which is my clear text password, and the user password. And I can write to be true. To be true, and if it fails, I can write passwords should match. And that's something I could have done in the previous test, so I'm gonna do it right now, because you know, false is not true is not very helpful as an error message. So at least I can give some context on this. And again, I'm focusing on the happy path here. I'm not gonna manage edge cases, etc. Right there. One important edge case, if I had more time, would be like the user doesn't exist in the database, but we'll come back to that later, maybe next week. But I have like, what, 6 minutes left, so not gonna be likely we're gonna start that now. So that's basically the first part, but I need a user in the database, right? So what I need to do, so let's start this. So probably after, so I have an email, clear test password, oops, remove some stuff. My bad, yeah, better. And I also need a user in the database. So for now, I need a session. So I don't have any particular session config stuff to write. Access mode by default will be right. Oops, access mode, come on. Come on, I always forget this. Access mode something? How does it look like? Access mode right. But anyway, I'm gonna use, you know what, I'm gonna use write transaction anyway, so that's gonna be explicit. So that gives me a session. Hopefully the session can be created. There is a big issue, so there is no point continuing the test. To be nil, should open session. What is it complaining about? Cannot use. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, interesting. It takes a struct, it doesn't take a pointer to a struct. Interesting. So session, and so if there is no error, I want to make sure that I close the session. And I've got this little helper here that takes anything that can be closed, also known as IO closer, and making sure it closes properly. So that's why I also manage the errors. There is one instead of using defer closer.close, which would ignore the error in the deferred execution. So that's why I'm using that. And so now that I have my session and that I close it when I'm done with it, I can finally do my write transaction with this transaction work. All right, I think that's enough, right? Let me see. Oh yeah, sorry, mistaken with all the languages I'm working with. You know, sometimes I forget. There is no short syntax for this. What is it complaining about? Yes, there is a return at some point. So for now, let's just be sloppy, just get the thing going. And that should give me a result that I don't really care about. Yeah, I don't care about the results. I care about errors. Yeah, user should be inserted or something. So, nice. Now I've got my transaction finally, and I get to run Cypher stuff. So maybe I will have to commit explicitly, I'm not sure. We'll see about that. And if we have a look real quick, if we have a look at the user we matched before, we need we need a label, user, email, password, and username. All right. So I need to do a create user with some properties. So I believe there is a shortcut to give a whole map. I'm going to be a bit more explicit here. So username will be username, so the new syntax in Neo4j for parameters. Email, and password. And of course I will need parameters with that, which will come here. And so let me reformat a little bit. So I need username. That will be my username. Yeah, actually I have not put any username, so you know what? I don't, oh, yeah, no, that's a username for the database. So let's be sloppy and just write this. And because I don't want to, yeah, let's just switch code. So username, we don't care. Email will be email. And password, well, password, I will need to hash it somehow. And I guess I will store, wait, we have 1 minute left, so I'm not sure I will have enough time, no. Hash, clear text password. And hash will be using bcrypt. And so that could return a result or an error. So I'm not returning anything, so I don't expect any results, but so I will need to do something about this. Let's see if I can pull it off real quick. Bcrypt. No, I'm gonna be very lazy and see how it's done because I've done it before. I'm not great at remembering stuff. Hash password using hash, and hash is bcrypt generate password, byte password, default cost. You know, cost manages the execution time. So that gives me this hash password. This time I'm in a test, so I can expect the password to be properly hashed. Password should be hashed, you know, just to get more context when there is an error. And return string of hash passwords. All right. Hopefully that should work well enough. That could give me an error or a result that I don't care about because I don't return anything, and that way I can return the error if anything happens. If it's nil, it's nil, else it's all good. Checking the error here, and hopefully that should be enough for my failing test. So yeah, we will know what to start with next week, which will be to make sure this test works. But let's see just how it fails, just to make sure I'm not missing anything obvious. And we'll continue next week after that. Just want to check how bad it fails. Hopefully it should just complain that it doesn't find the user, because you know there is a panic, implement me. Oh, it's worse than that. There is a panic. Time to panic then. Where is it? Session driver. Oh, driver. Driver is nil for some reason. So why? Why did I miss? What did I miss? What? Oh yeah, my bad, of course. Shadowing. Shadowing sucks. Shadowing is not great. I was introducing a local variable instead of initializing this one. So let's rerun that because that's a lame failure. I wouldn't want to end with that. Let's hopefully get to the panic implement me in the implementation. So starting the container. And hopefully, yeah, implement me, great. Okay, so we'll continue with that next week, and next week will probably be the last I live stream on this particular project, at least for just a driver experience, because in 2 weeks I will have a special guest and we'll talk about the Golang OGM called GoGM. And we'll probably have a few sessions on that. So I invite, if you're interested, there is this Milestone GoGM thing, or GoGM. I think it's the author I talked with say GoGM. I say GoGM. Whatever suits you, basically. But we'll talk about this in 2 weeks. So last week will probably be the last I'm live streaming this effort. And I will continue to work on the application, obviously, do some more refactoring and some more cleanup. But hopefully, yeah, I should get at least to the login part, and I will try to implement more endpoints in the background. So yeah, so next week, continue on this, and 2 weeks after we'll start the GoGM series. Maybe we'll migrate this application into GoGM once it has more, you know, code, basically. Or we'll start with another application, I'm not sure yet. But yeah, stay tuned for more Golang adventures. And we'll see what happens in the new year. We'll probably continue a little bit with GoGM, maybe not. And maybe I will switch languages, technologies. So let me know also what you'd like to see in the coming weeks as well. And thank you for your attention. Thanks a lot for joining. Stay safe in these strange times. And I will see you all later. Thank you and bye-bye.